Hi, this is Matt Stone of 180 Degree Health, and got a new format for the podcast. I promised that it would be archived from now on, and I promised that it would be archived sometime in 2010. And this is may seem like an odd choice to put it on YouTube, but I think YouTube has a large network, and YouTube videos and presentations in general seem to be pretty visible in the search engines, and I can add tags to all these podcasts and help people help themselves, help them find 180 Degree Health and some of this information. And I don't know, I think it's the right choice. Some of you computer geeks may have a difference of opinion with that, and may know of a better system from me that can achieve those things. If so, pass that along. I'm a nutrition geek. I'm definitely not a computer geek, but I'm getting there. I'm crossing that bridge. Last week we talked about leptin. We talked about fructose. We talked about how that relates to blood sugar, insulin resistance, and some of the things that I talked about in my book, 180 Degree Diabetes. I did post a blog post, as promised, on that very topic. And for those of you who got a chance to read that, I think you probably found that fairly interesting, especially the ones that are really well versed and have been following along this journey as trying to figure things out. Came across an amazing video today by a guy named Robert Lustig. And some people were trying to turn me on to it. They sent me a couple little things, little shout-outs, and Lustig points out that baby formula is kind of a nutritional nightmare. Its content is really, really high in corn syrup, sucrose, and his whole hypothesis, his whole thesis, his life's work is culminated with the idea that fructose is the primary dietary evil. Fructose, and fructose alone, is capable of causing metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, and all the things from which that metabolic shifting of the tracks takes place is all stems from the ingestion of too much fructose. And I'll try my best to summarize the video in a short period of time. The video is an hour and a half. It's a great video. I'm sure I could talk to it until I'm blue in the face about how you just got to watch this video, but life is a busy thing these days, and 90 minutes is a lot to ask. So I'll see if I can summarize it in a little bit shorter, a little bit less technical, and you guys have a good familiar background with fructose if you've read any of my ebooks and followed along in 180 Degree Health. But he adds some new elements and some further understanding, and does a great job of explaining the whole process in detail. So fructose is something that's found in white sugar, 50% fructose, 50% glucose. Now, we talked about last week, the hormone leptin is an appetite-suppressing hormone. And it's very important, and it has potentially a direct relationship with insulin and blood sugar by virtue of that. So scientists have found that if you raise leptin levels, if you inject insulin into rats, they become undiabetic, their blood sugars go down, they lose their appetite, they become unobese, they lose all their weight, and they become normalized. We talked about this last week in the last podcast. With fructose, it's a totally different situation. With fructose does not raise leptin, it does not raise insulin directly after the point of ingestion, and it is capable, for unknown reasons, as far as I understand, of inducing leptin resistance, where the cells are resistant to the function of the hormone leptin. So it's kind of a double whammy. Again, you need leptin to rise to feel full, and you need to be able to respond to leptin in order to feel the effects of leptin. And so fructose acts by two mechanisms, inducing leptin resistance and also not raising leptin like all other foods, especially glucose does, and is fundamentally different for that reason. And has a lot to do with why portion sizes are going up, why we're consuming more calories, and why we're becoming more overweight. And it's not just a simple matter of calories, because you consume other forms of calories, leptin goes up, and the system self-regulates itself much better. With fructose and without a rise in leptin, and even if you're raising leptin with tons of glucose and other foods and lots of calories, and you're putting on body weight, that feedback loop is broken, and you can continue to gain weight and gain weight and gain weight and gain weight if you are leptin resistant, because that feedback mechanism that's supposed to make you less hungry never kicks in. And so that's really what that's all about. That's the fundamental problem. Another huge divergence between fructose and glucose that Dr. Lustig brings up is how it's metabolized in the liver. Most of the glucose that we consume never even makes it to the liver. And if you're to consume, I think he used the example of 120 calories of glucose in the form of white bread or some similar source, say potatoes, a very, very small percentage of that actually makes it to the liver. And so it does not burden the liver, and he actually makes the comparison between fructose and ethanol, which is an alcohol byproduct that consumed in too great of a quantity, we all know can pickle your liver with by converting into various aldehydes, like formaldehyde, which basically makes your liver kind of like the frog in biology class. And it causes severe problems, and it causes conversion of fatty acids from the carbohydrate in the liver. I mean, he refers to that as de novo lipogenesis. And I made fun of Mercola a little bit last week because he called fructose the most lipophilic carbohydrate, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but he meant lipogenic. And yes, and Lustig makes this comparison. And we all know that too much alcohol is bad for us, bad for our liver, and can create a beer belly and insulin resistance and so on. And he says fructose can do the exact same thing. And that giving your child a Budweiser and a glass of orange juice are pretty much equivalent. And I think in terms of its overall effects on the liver, that's actually probably true. And he shows lots of nice graphs with correlations between fruit juice consumption, fructose in any form, and obesity and metabolic syndrome, and especially in children where it's even more evident. And he talks about just the absurdity of the whole calorie hypothesis, and I would agree with that. I think it's very, very good work. And basically he makes one point that I find to be very powerful is we have an epidemic of obese 6-month-old kids. What is causing that? And in part, it's their formula that they're getting, but also, when the mother consumes a lot of fructose or a lot of alcohol or both, it has the same effect, and that effect is that it can induce insulin resistance in the children, and you can enter this world as an insulin-resistant, leptin-resistant person that wants to eat. The feedback mechanism is broken, and you're in trouble. And that's what we're seeing in the world. That's why this problem is accelerating. High fructose corn syrup certainly plays a role because we're consuming more of it than we have of any sweetener in the past. Crystalline fructose has seen similar increases and will continue to see even greater increases because it's considered to be even healthier by the mainstream because it's low glycemic than high fructose corn syrup. But we'll continue conversations like this. I'll probably switch to something next week, a little bit different, but it's a great primer. Stay away from that fructose. Watch the video if you can, if you have the time. I think it'll make a big difference because that really should be their primary focus. But that's it for me this week. We'll get back to it next week. Thanks again. This is Matt Stone of 180 Degree Health.